The first presenter that we have this afternoon is Elizabeth Barron from Ford. Just been chatting to her backstage. They're up to some really exciting things over at Ford. So give a big round of applause to Elizabeth Barron, who's going to come off on stage.
Thank you, sir. Hi, everybody. Hi. Everybody doing okay? I'm in the enviable position of like just after lunch. So I am going to talk to you about a very personal story, and it's a little bit weird because it combines my experiences with my professional life. And usually I get up and I talk about tech and about how we use it, and it's like really easy. But this is different because it's my experience and my little world here. And so it's called the mind's eye, and what it is I acquired stereoscopic vision as a, 40-something-year-old adult. And so most of my career at Ford, I was developing immersive VR, and I couldn't see it. And so I have, I think, a pretty unique perspective on what that means. So this painting that you see is Rembrandt, and Rembrandt was also rumored to be stereo blind, and it's a condition that affects more people than you might think. So this is a picture of me and my family when I was a youngin'. I'm the little girl with the cat-eye glasses. My kindergarten teacher had cat-eye glasses, and I thought they were just great, so I had to have them. And when I was about that age, my mom took me to the eye doctor, and I overheard her talking to the doctor, and then he said, she'll never be a fighter pilot, but she's fine. And I thought about that and thought, well, why not? Why can't I be a fighter pilot? Why can't I just go and conquer the world and do anything I want? I'm pretty stubborn, as most of us are, and I didn't understand that comment. So I asked my mom about it, and she said, the world's full of opportunity, you can do a lot of things, just not that. But it really kind of stuck with me a little bit. It planted a seed, like why was something different for me than everybody else? But, the world's a magical place, and I had fun as a kid. My family's sweet, so I just kind of moved on. But in reality, I had two conditions going. One was called strabismus, and the other was called amblyopia. And amblyopia means I have one very dominant eye and one eye that has less than ideal vision. That is normally corrected with glasses, but then I had this other condition called strabismus, which means my eyes were misaligned one to the other. And so I think everybody in this room would know that when you form a stereo image, your eyes converge on a point, you figure out how far away that is, and then that's how you can judge where it is with respect to the other data point you got when your eyes moved. Well, my eyes were like this, so they could never converge on a point. So the result for me was I either used my right eye or I used my left eye, but I never used them together. And because of that, I had a partial view of the world. So I had I was right eye dominant, so I basically would see, like this and vertically like this. And then everything on my left, I would disregard. And so that's just how I went through life. And if something came at me from my left, something would happen, I would visually see this motion, and then my brain would switch to my left eye, and then that would become what I would use. But when that happened, the world would kind of shift. So a little bit of a goofy thing there, but all in all, no big deal, right? And so in the world, there are 15 cues that you get that are monoscopic. So Wiggle VR, I think, demonstrates that concept pretty well. So, you can get interposition, relative size, what size something is, you can see motion. So you have all these cues. So in general, like I would know that, I'm here and that's there and you're there because, you can see that with one eye. So didn't seem like that big of a deal. And I was missing those 3 binocular depth cues, but all in all, that was okay. But this is kind of a funny story, but when I was a teenager. I was on a date, and my date took me to the Detroit riverfront to see the fireworks for the Independence Day celebration. And I was, Detroit is across, there's the Detroit River, and on the other side is Windsor, Ontario. We were sitting there looking at the Windsor skyline, and I said to him, I feel really sorry for those people in Windsor. And he's like, well, why? And I said, well, they're seeing the back of the fireworks. and he, like the look on his face, he was, and it was like surprise and I think a little pity. He was like, okay. But that was indicative of how I saw the world. It was like a moving screen in front of a moving window in front of me, and that's what I saw. And so I kind of perceived this backside and the front side. And if I had thought for a moment about pyrotechnics and the science behind what makes a firework explode, I would have known that's not an accurate thought. But I wondered, like, why do people who don't think about the science of pyrotechnics have just an innate understanding of the volumetric nature of a firework when it explodes? So it really stuck with me, and I ended up going to school for computer graphics and getting a degree in programming for CAD. And I turned that into a career. So it was actually a pretty natural thing for me to do, to take a 3D concept and put it on a flat plane and show it to people. So it was really kind of like how my mind thought anyway. So it was a really good way to start. And I just have to laugh because what you're seeing there, that tech, is actually higher tech than what it looked like when I started at Ford. That just cracks me up. Yeah, we had like green screens. We didn't even have color. But back in like '99, I started doing virtual reality. This was our first try, and if you look at that poor gentleman that was actually a Jaguar Land Rover in the UK. We suited him up. We had magnetic mocap. We were limited to 60,000 polys in the scene, not much. And that was it. And I could see this power of doing this tech, but only in my mind. Like, I couldn't see stereo or understand truly how those things were going. But I kept evolving the tech, and a lot of times it was me or somebody else, and then eventually it turned into a global team. But in this case, this is still magnetic motion tracking. That's a vehicle-seated buck, we call it, made out of mahogany and oak. And I wish I would have saved it, because I think it should be in a VR museum somewhere. It was super cool. There's no metal in it. Even the screws and bolts were all like 3D printed. It was pretty awesome. But anyway, I worked on doing virtual physical interaction, adding more of the physical world in. The data got a little better. We were doing planar reflections and things. Started adding more with manufacturing process capability and embedding information into the vehicle model. And then started looking at bringing together a whole entire vehicle. So around the 2011, 2012 timeframe, I started seeing a specialist, because in automotive terms, my eyes had bad camber, caster, and toe. That's a really good way of showing what was wrong with my eyes. So I went to see a specialist at Kellogg Eye Center at University of Michigan Hospital, and when I would go there, they'd say, follow the puppy prints to your room, because most of their patients were children, and they didn't really think an old dog like me could learn that new trick and actually see in stereo. So they gave me a stereo, they gave me Prism Glasses that were lenses that counteracted the imbalance in my eyes. So if you looked at me and I was wearing those glasses, like my eyes were misaligned like this, and you would actually see my eyeballs like this, but my brain would perceive that things were more together. And so I put those glasses on. I took them from the doctor's office, put my glasses on in my car, and I instantly saw my steering wheel pop out at me, and I saw the Ford logo, and I was just hooked. And I'm like, this is so amazing. I've just got to try. I have to do this. So I knew there was side effects for the surgery. One of them is that's why I wear glasses now, because I have pretty bad astigmatisms, because they basically take your eyes out, align them, stitch them back, and put them back in your head. That's, in summary, what this surgery was. So this is me after surgery. And if you look at my eyes, you'll see they're really nice and straight. And everything else is just really messed up. And so I'll just move on from that because nobody needs to see that for too long. But after my surgery, I was on a roller coaster ride I couldn't get off. Everything was wrong and everything was right. So I looked at everything. I couldn't even use like one eye and try to just see normal because both eyes were realigned. So I had these just extreme nausea and a lot of just bizarre things, like just walking and looking down at the ground, and it was pretty intense for a period of time. Like I couldn't drive right away and stuff like that. So riding a bike was like, whoa, But this is my backyard. We live out in the country, and I went outside just by myself, and I sat down by those Queen Anne's lace, and I started watching the way they moved. And I'm like, this is just so amazing. I can't believe how cool this is. So when I could focus on a thing and just kind of forget about what I used to know, things were much better. And then my family and we like to go to West Michigan, and they have like some killer dunes out there. And I watched the sand move, and I'm like, this is so cool, the little blades of grass. But the most important and critical aspect for me was people's faces. So this is my family. I have 4 kids and my husband, Gary. And this was in Ludington on that vacation. And I looked at their faces, and I had a new understanding of what they look like. It's not like I didn't look at them and recognize them immediately after the surgery. It wasn't like that. But I had a better emotional connection for reading their faces and understanding what they were thinking or feeling by looking at them. And that was kind of new to me. And I used to think you saw depth and you didn't see depth. And when you see depth, things have a dimension, but that's it. It's way more than that. There is a cognitive component to it and an emotional component that goes with it. The other thing I think is interesting about faces is I kept thinking everybody lost weight because like the camera adds 10 pounds, well, stereoscopic vision takes it away. So people's faces go back and they have depth. And so I kept thinking, wow, he lost weight, she lost weight, but it was just me. So like little things, just like looking at my cheese plate, like being outside and like looking at it. I actually went and got my camera and took a picture of this so I could remember what it was like when I looked at that and saw this plate, it just come off the table like that. And so my husband would say, oh, there she goes, she's having another visual acid trip. And I would be like, oh, wow, like literally, like just do that. Just like, look at your hands, it's just like amazing. I'm still not over it, but so what is new and exciting about the world? I tried really hard to quantify like how different the world is to me. And I guess the way, besides just the pure emotion that comes with it and the recognition of things, I have a sense of spaciousness of the world around me that I didn't have before. I didn't have this volumetric understanding. Like right now I'm standing here and I can see both of my hands, and that's just amazing. Like I just looked at things differently, but that depth and having it wired into my brain like that is like a new sensation. And there is depth cues that are I don't know what they're called, but I would say macro and micro level cues. So like the little buttons on the e-reader, they just look different to me. And just the other thing is I feel more a part of the world I'm in. And I know that sounds really bizarre, but I do. I feel like I'm part of things instead of kind of watching everything as it goes by like in front of me. And so, yeah, so then I thought, well, how I have this new reality, what should I do with it? So I started like thinking about masters, like back in time through art and science, and I looked at like Einstein and Vitruvius, and this is a quote from Aristotle, but I like this one the best. The aim of art is to represent not the outward appearance of things, but the inward significance. So I thought about that in the context of immersive realities, and I thought, what is inwardly significant? And one of the things I learned was that sometimes some of the optical illusions that we have are actual like things that we use to judge our reality. So this is a Jesuit church in Vienna. It's painted by an artist named Pozzo. I think it's from 1703. And there is no dome in the church. He painted that illusion. And we should be able to represent in the immersive environments depth and parallax and shadow and like some of the optical illusions because they're part of our reality. So for me, just thinking like I think, I'm like, okay, how can I take subjective data and put it in an objective context? And you have to go back to science for that. So looking at the physical properties of light and how it propagates in a scene, thinking about environmental simulations, and thinking about all the other aspects of vision and stereo. We went through, and this is the latest, near latest iteration of what we do at Ford. So you can get immersed in a model that looks this good, and I think it looks fantastic. But when I got immersed with my new eyes, I looked at that and I thought things were wrong. I used to think it was like the cat's meow, like, wow, this is so amazing, this looks so great. But I could see that there were things that were wrong that I wasn't catching before. So we worked to implement real-time ray tracing and then show that to the global team in 4K. So if you look at whoops, let me go back. If you look at like the back and forth, I'm just gonna like cycle through. It just amazes me, like that is no change to the geometry. It's only a change in how it's rendered. And I think when you look at the front end has more of a peak to it. The body side has more contour. So these are the things that I thought about that kind of came out of my new experiences. And this is interior shot, and then if you look at that again, just like how much more depth and emotion it has, and feeling that you're surrounded by that data. And I'll just like go back and forth on that one more time. This is pretty cool. So let's see, this isn't going. There it goes. So I wanted to go from that just to say thank you. So like doing what I did at Ford, I didn't tell basically hardly anybody that I had visual issues, because if you looked at that poor guy with all those wires on him and you were gonna cut a project, whose project would you cut? The woman that can't even see what she's doing, maybe. So I seriously wondered, like, would people look at me and look at what I'm doing and say, that should go. So I really didn't tell people about my eye issues, and sometimes I would just do something really bad, because like back then I had to like create a stereo rig, constrain the cameras together, set up the view frustrums, and constrain it to a fixture that'd be the HMD, all that kind of stuff that now we just take for granted that we say go into VR mode. And I would do it wrong, and I'd switch the eyes left to right, or my view frustrum would be funny, and then somebody would get immersed and go, oh, that's just terrible, what are you doing? And so these two gentlemen on the leftmost and middle, Dan and Rich Jacaki, were my eyes. No matter where they were anywhere around, if I texted them, they would come and look at what I did and make sure that it was right. And then the gentleman on the right is Dan Lincoln, and he worked and led the team that did the integration for real-time ray tracing. And he's just been like the most steadfast guy to work with, and he did a great job leading that. So the last thought I have, this is my older daughter, and this is the day of the eclipse in Wyoming in 2017. And I looked at her, and she was in this tree, and I saw that branch come out, and I saw her, and I just like had another trip. And I'm like, this is so amazing. So I just would like to leave you with the thought that maybe look around your world, and if you've been blessed with stereo vision, it affects about 3% of the population at birth and about 12% later in life because people acquire it due to other medical issues. Maybe just appreciate the little things and start to look around the world and, look at that brick and the way the light's on it and go, wow, and maybe have some trips of your own. So, all right, thank you very much.